All right, so Annie, if you can hear me, oh yeah, so we are already, now we are on, and I already see the number of participants, increasing and increasing. This is amazing. So hi guys, it's great that you're all joining. And I suggest we wait a couple of minutes, to let everybody join. So I see the number goes up, it's already at 200. That's
wow.
So exciting.
Yeah. It's great.
And it's really good to have you guys on here too, Windsor, David, Randy. I'm really thrilled. So thank you for taking the time out of the day. I'm sure you guys are also kind of busy these days with keeping everything together, no?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
but it's a pleasure.
I'm really happy for the diversion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always good to gather together ideas and thoughts and help each other out, gain new perspectives. So happy to be here.
So let's see how we do. So in this very moment, my mouse doesn't want to work anymore. It always comes in timely. So I suggest we wait another minute or two, and then I think we just get started.
All right.
So I hope that my Wi-Fi doesn't give up. I'm sure you guys also had some spotty Wi-Fi in the last days, so that everybody is on it and zooming like crazy people.
Yesterday, Zoom. I read this morning that Zoom has signed up 200 million new accounts in the past week.
Wow. Did anybody think to invest in that?
I tried this morning.
Hold on, I'm calling my stockbroker.
Yeah, we're right back.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, 200 million. I mean, that's incredible.
2 million new accounts.
Because now that's the new happy hour, right? Everybody's having their happy hour on Zoom.
I think it's the new everything.
Makes them feel better about drinking alone.
We had our first major construction meeting yesterday via Zoom.
Wonderful.
Yeah, which is an interesting experience to have a job site visit with Zoom. With
well, it kind of makes you realize that you can do that. That's been kind of the greatest learning curve, is that there's so much with technology we can do now that maybe because of our old ways of doing things, we weren't tapping that resource in the way that maybe we would, unless we
kind of a whole new world.
Something like a cataclysm to have us get to the computer and see what was there for us.
I'm not sure this is exactly the tree I wanted to shake, but here we are.
Well, sometimes it takes a real seismic shift to make you learn new things. God knows. I'm not of the computer generation, so every day is a learning curve. I thought when I figured out how to get my printer to work, I was, I had reached the pinnacle of technology, but
Yeah.
All right. So I just got one feedback that one of my colleagues can't see you, Windsor. So Annie and Whitney, maybe you guys can just check this, because I can see Windsor, and I'm sure David and Randy, you also said you can see each other.
Yeah,
I see Windsor, and lovely flowers behind her.
Yeah, me too. I'm jealous.
From my garden.
Looking at my half, dried up tulips in my background.
Is there something that I need to do here? I can see Windsor and other panel members.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so
I see all four of you.
Okay, fantastic. All right.
Yeah.
All right, that's good. So, I want to welcome you all to today's online discussion, how to keep your business going. We have so many participants today, from interior designers to press to even other brands from our space. And it shows one more time how important it is to stick together in times like that. We from Schumacher, we are humbled that we can bring the community together and that we can help to get through this together. Next Thursday, we are currently planning on hosting another webinar. So every Thursday, 3 p.m. East Coast time. Next week will be about, the CARES Act and how it can benefit your business. So please watch out for the link. It will come early next week. So with me, I have today three exceptional people, creative minds and business powerhouses, who I would love to introduce. I mean, you've seen all of them already, but let me start with Windsor. Windsor is the founder of Windsor Smith Home. And Windsor, you are an interior designer based out of LA and known for balancing classic and modern styles. And you have been selected by Veranda, as one of the most top 25 design influencers. And you have also launched a Rizzoli book called Homefront Design for Modern Living that for everybody who has not seen it, you should definitely buy it and look at it. Then David. David is the founder of David Kleinberg Design Associates. And David, you have, I think, a 35-year career with Project Reaching around the world. You worked for over 16 years with Parrish Hadley before you started your own business. And if I may say that, I think since then it was a whirlwind. You've designed some of the most prestigious places in the world. You've been published by pretty much every shelter magazine that I know. And you've also have your own book called Traditional Now, Interiors by David Kleinberg, which I also love very much. And then last but not least, Randy, you're the founder of J. Randall Powers Interior Decoration, and you're one of the most talented and in-demand interior designers out of Houston, but obviously also known across the world. And while your style, at least, based on my understanding, mainly skews to the traditional side, I think you mix classic and modern styles so beautifully that the rooms always result in feeling completely timeless. We have a special group here today because also Randy has been published by pretty much every magazine I know. I feel very honored and humbled to have gained you three here for today's conversation. Last but not least, let me also introduce myself real quick. I'm Benni Frowein. I'm Schumacher's president, and I want to use this opportunity to thank everyone from Schumacher, with a lot of witnesses here on the phone call today. It's just amazing how dedicated and passionate you all have been over the last 2.5 weeks to keep our warehouse open, to keep our sales operation going, to keep our creative juices flowing. We are basically working better than ever before, and this is thanks to you. So thank you very much. So before I start with my exciting questions, I want to give you some logistical, framework for everybody who's watching. So I would love to do a 30 to 40-minute panel conversation. I've prepared some questions, and I've taken all of your comments that you sent before into account. That I think we have a lot of topics covered. And then in the last 20 to 30 minutes, we do a Q&A. So you have a little icon at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A, and you can enter your questions later. Wait a little bit so that you see which topics we cover. Overall, we cover, how to keep your team motivated and how you go through the day and how you speak with clients. But we're also going to talk about, how do you keep your business going? How do you react to clients that do not want to move forward? And how important is it right now to focus on, finding new clients, being out there on social media. So we're going to touch that topic too. And then last but not least, we will talk about cost and how to save costs and whether that's important. And if it's important, how to do this. So I suggest we just start. And, seeing Windsor's amazing flowers in the background, my first question is, where are we catching the three of you today? Windsor, maybe we start with you. Is this already your new favorite home office?
Oh, well, I've for most of my life worked out of my home or a property that's adjacent to my home where I have my offices. But I've enjoyed being here, and despite the circumstances, I've really loved working out of my house, and realized that with technology the way it is, that this wasn't as difficult and daunting as a transition as I thought it was going to be. And we've now gotten everybody set up to be working virtually. So, so far, so good.
Amazing. David, where do we catch? Well, we see where we catch you today. Is this now your favorite room?
If you knew how truly absurd it is that you're catching me in my kitchen, you'd appreciate it. So I'm like lots of people. I left New York City. I came out to my house in East Hampton, which I do go to all year long, but obviously more in the summer. I'm sitting in the kitchen, which I fully admit is not my most used room in the house. but apparently it's the one with the best Wi-Fi reception.
That's awesome.
So here I am. So that's fine. And like Windsor, we obviously tried to see what was coming down the road, and we all set up the office remotely. Everybody is scattered around. The team is in, some people stayed in New York, some people are also out in Long Island, some people are in Connecticut, some people are as far away as Florida. We're now going from Florida all the way to Maine. And everyone's set up in a sort of remote connection to the office server, and we're availing ourselves of all of these tools of, I think we all wake up every morning and just hope that the World Wide Web doesn't go crashing, because I think it's the only thread by which we're being held up.
We would then officially be going to hell in a handbasket.
Exactly.
So true.
Yeah.
So true.
So I'm happy in my house, but and very grateful and lucky that I have a house to go to. So I'm very
and I'm glad to see you all three healthy. Randy, where are we catching you? I see beautiful paintings in the background.
I'm at home also. We shuttered the office about 2.5 weeks ago, right before everything kind of got super crazy. Everybody pulled the files they needed to pulled computers that they needed to have from the office. Everybody went their separate ways, reset them up back at home, and everybody's working remotely, kind of like I think everybody in the U.S. is right now, or maybe even the world. So, we're just all doing what we can from our houses and staying in contact and texting and trying to be business as normal and whatever this new normal is.
Yep. I am, and I think, let me react to your comment right away, because I think now that we are all working remote, and I think, after 14 days or 16 days now in the new world, you've set up your teams, everybody's Wi-Fi works at least most of the time, everybody has a laptop and so on. Windsor, how do you keep your team motivated, engaged, and focused now? Because, for everybody who is not working alone, you certainly have somebody working for you, whether it's one person or 3 or 10. You need to keep them, focused and dedicated and engaged and motivated. How do you do this?
Well, I have to say that I have amazing people to begin with. And we are all still together. For those of you who are wondering, who let people go and who kept people, I've kept my entire staff. They're very high functioning. They work incredibly autonomously anyway. So this is really just a shift in geography for us, more so than it is an abrupt change on that front. So they have a very long rope. And so we have kind of a system that I have 2 key administrators in my office who are brilliant, and they came up with a way in which for everyone to be able to communicate. So they actually go into the office in the morning virtually. So they literally have a thread between them, so they can be asking each other questions, talking back and forth. They sign off and say, I'm going to lunch, or I'm going to go do yoga, or whatever it is. And so there is this sense that we're all still together. And we do that through a Microsoft program. And then we have touchstones. So our various projects are in various stages of install, or in some instances we might be in construction. And as you know, in the state of California anyway, construction is continuing, but in very small protected crews with very high levels of security. But we are not out in the field. We're all in our offices kind of navigating that. And so I think with these various touchstones in the beginning of the day, they submit task lists and their sort of lists of things they're doing that day. And at the end of the day, they checked off all the boxes of the things that they've accomplished. And it's working actually really nice.
And I think, you're referring, just for everybody who is interested in that, I think you refer to Microsoft Teams.
Yes.
We, for example, use Slack. So everybody can try and Google those. They're amazing, because I do think this virtual, just like being in the office helps a lot to just manage people's time. David, how do you guys do that?
Well, we're actually not as practiced. So we really kind of scrambled a little, to be perfectly honest. I mean, we did have our, IT person set everybody up. So everybody, logs into the same programs from home that they were logging into. at their desks in the office. We do, we thank God for Zoom meetings, which we were talking about. We all should have owned a piece of it before this whole thing started. But we've all learned, so we're doing our office meetings, which is a regular, our regular meetings through Zoom. I was telling Randy in Windsor last week, we did a Zoom office meeting that turned into a Zoom cocktail meeting. So that was sort of a way of motivating people where, and we're mostly still communicating via email. I am, I sort of joke that I'm a bit old school, but I still, well, my teams, I have 3 partners in the business, and like Windsor, I've got a wonderful office of people, many, most of whom have been with part of, the office for years and years and years, 10, 12, 14 years. So everyone is really fully autonomous. They know their jobs. They don't need somebody standing and following up with them on a hour by hour basis. I tend to be a very collaborative person. After years of Parish Hadley, after years, I am the guy who likes to stand across from a desk or side by side and flip through things. And so it's probably harder for me than it is for anyone else in terms of learning how to work remotely. But in our office meeting yesterday, I was just sort of, being a little bit of a cheerleader and saying, are we following up on our shopping lists? Are we, I've just, are we emailing in with our clients, seeing how they're doing? How are their families? Having, just maintaining successful dialogues and relationships with those people and people you talk to. You go from talking to them on a daily basis, some of my team talking to them many times a day, to now not communicating in the same way. So trying to make sure we all remember to be doing that.
Yep. Randy, how do you go about it? How do you keep your team motivated, engaged, and focused?
Well, we've been having our Zoom meetings and our FaceTime meetings, and just checking in, with each other, making sure that not only are we getting business done, are we contacting our clients, are we doing the same thing like David's saying, are we just calling, emailing, just to say, hey, checking in, not necessarily, hey, we want to do business, but just making sure that they feel appreciated and that we're thinking about them, kind of going through all of this. And then in regards to, everyone, the way my office works is everyone has very specific dedicated roles, so to speak. So everyone's kind of been doing their own little normal things that they do on a day-to-day basis, or clients that they handle, or bookkeeping or accounting, or, ensuring that orders are still going through and all those kind of things. And then, really at the end of the day, we just kind of reach out to say, hey, what happened today? Almost like if we were, in a normal day-to-day situation, and say, let's talk about what we did today. Did we get the following things done? Are these checked off? What do we see coming in? What do we see going out? What issues are we having? Have we talked to so-and-so? How is so-and-so doing? Do we have a construction meeting coming up, that we need to probably tackle beforehand, say, maybe we should be there, maybe we shouldn't be there. Can we do this by Zoom? Can maybe someone go, not all of us go, and maybe one of us just go check and, walk through, say, it looks great. Do you want to go look afterwards? So, in Texas, we're really having, like, New York and now LA, I guess, Windsor, we're really having to practice social distancing, and they're taking it really seriously, and we're taking it really seriously. So I think the biggest, hardest thing for us is just not having the normal access to our showrooms that we have a day-to-day, interaction with. We are in the design and decoration building in Houston. We office there. So for us to run down the elevator is so de rigueur and normal for us. And not having that for me has been a little bit of a challenge. So, an hour before we started this meeting, one of the showrooms, they're all working remotely, but they're going in, dropped off an enormous box of fabric samples for me to take a look at, just so that we can keep things going and keeping things fresh. And I also really love the way.
Did you leave it outside the door for 24 hours and wipe it with a Clorox bleach?
Well, I'm sure one of the persons who dropped it off is watching this. They did leave it outside the door, and I did spray it. So we'll leave it at that. Sorry,
but I think Randy, you're saying something very interesting. I'm picking up from that, because obviously you're working on the current projects, and I would love to dig a little deeper there and maybe I start with you, Windsor, again, because, so what I imagine is so hard. So you besides the fact, what comes after and how do we get more business for the future and so on, we talk about that in a minute. But like with your current projects, how do you do design meetings now? Like, how do you do them with your team and how do you do them with your clients? Because, well, you have nothing to touch anymore. Or are you sending samples around and have everybody look at them before? Or like, how do you do that now? Because we all know that photographs are great, but I'm not always telling the 100% truth.
Well, I mean, I don't want to kind of, make it look like it is business as usual. It's not. We are all sort of finding our way and sort of taking in what just happened. I mean, that was a colossal shift, or seismic shift, as David said, which is perfect. And I think that it's not as much, this is my personal opinion, by the way, it's not as much a time to push forward with new business as it is to really figure out what this means. Because I think you have to create a foundation now. And it's a new world. It's not going to go back to being exactly the same. It's a whole paradigm shift. So we're going to have to, it's a time for us to be thoughtful and to think about our businesses and to figure out what that new landscape is for us individually. And it's not going to be, there's not going to be one playbook. It's not going to be what's good for David or good for Windsor, or good, it's going to be, you're going to have to really dig deep and say, what about this business do I love? And what aspects of it could I do better? What is it that this pause has allowed me to look at and improve upon? And how can I invest deeper in the people that help this business thrive? And I think this is a time that is about supporting them, making them feel secure, and then letting our clients know that we know the landscape has changed and we appreciate that they're with us on this change, and to be patient as we learn and figure out our way. And I think that once we kind of go in first and figure out where we're going to go from here, then we're going to be able to recognize that with all deprivation comes innovation. And so I'm extremely excited about this next wave in our business, because I think our business was, like many businesses, due for a makeover. And I think it took almost something this big for us to really sort of start that process. So I'm excited for young designers and seasoned designers and all of us to figure out sort of what that new landscape looks like and what is all of our place in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very comforting what you're saying also, because in this like time of high uncertainty, I think your approach also gives a lot of comfort to not, run around like a headless chicken, but to like really think about, okay, so what does this mean for me and so on before you already try to find a new client and so on, and that this is not the right time for us. Personally, I think, and that's what I'm seeing also in the interaction with our clients is that, and we see it right here, right now with Zoom, is that the digitalization has been just got a huge booster. And I think, the way how we're going to interact with our clients, but also with our vendors and how we look at design is going to be much more digital. And talking about that, Windsor, because I think I really do want to also come back to this very specific point of like, how do you conduct a team meeting now? How do you deal with like a scheme where you just only see the pictures, or do you send the samples around? How do you do that? Because I really want to give the people out there, as much, kind of concrete ideas that they can implement for their teams too.
Sure. Back to David's point, I mean, the tactility is the part that no one's perfected yet, right? So, and I'm sure there maybe is something out there when we haven't found it yet, or someone hasn't discovered it yet, right? So that, I think, is the hardest piece. With my particular office, everyone took sort of doubles of everything. We did have enough time to sort of organize ourselves. So they took their own libraries, their own trays. They took all the important documents that they needed. And I think that in inter-office, we're able to communicate very well, and we're all very familiar with fabrics. What we've done with clients is if we were in that particular stage of the design process with them, then we've said, you know what, let's push forward the things that aren't that in this moment, and let's catch up or drag a net of all the things that we can easily do in this new kind of format. And then let's revisit those things and pull them forward. And I think that that's because I think it is true. There is a gap. There's a chasm between like what you can sort of express and get behind. And it's a tactile business. So we have found that like we're really dragging that net, pulling all sort of lagging issues in construction projects. That has been much easier to view where we are in the various stages of the construction. And then I think that we've sort of, it's young. This is a new kind of process. So we've been able to have plenty to do with our clients without having to get into a lot of the tactile part of it. Your firm's maybe larger, so perhaps that's, you know, it's something that people are asking for. But I've found that pretty much this is a global thing. And our clients are in the same space where they're trying to make sure their families are safe. They're trying to school their children. They're trying to make sure that their parents are safe. I mean, there's a lot going on. So they almost are relieved that we're giving them what I think the motto of for business right now for us is that you want to kind of keep it sustained and you want to keep that connectivity, but you also want to manage it the way you usually do. So my motto is bite-sized pieces. So I was in conversation on new projects when this happened, and you know, it was something where both the client and we wanted to move forward. And I said, you know what, why don't we take the contract and instead of looking at it in a daunting way as a very big, long agreement, why don't I redesign it to where I can give you bite-sized pieces? We can go into the spatial designing phase. We can look into the building codes. We can figure out what we're going to do from a spatial perspective. And why don't I, you know, divide this contract in a way that we can continue this process. It's something fun for you to do. It's a nice distraction. We can make some headway, but it isn't sort of like taking on a huge project at this time when the world is uncertain.
I think that's really interesting, Windsor. Thank you, because I think, you know, there's one tip to slice, you know, the big, you know, thing that you have in front of you down for your clients. I think is a really good tip. David, how do you do that? Like, how does your team does that? You know, how do you conduct meetings right now with, you know, how do you?
Well, I mean, clearly the first thing I did was I decided not to make any big decisions right now because we are all figuring out what this is going to look like. I think how it's playing out in New York is probably the most extreme example. All our projects have been shut down all over New York, you know, out on Long Island, everywhere, Connecticut. And I agree with Windsor in that, I mean, what we've done is I'm concentrating on the aspects of the projects that I think we can concentrate on. So we're not concentrating on decorative schemes, sort of fabrics, colors, you know, carpet selections. What we are concentrating on are those projects that are really more in what I think of as design development phase, where you can really share sketches and plans and elevations and things that are really easily translatable to the internet, to sort of two-dimensional, you know, kind of conversations. You know, we can do renderings, we can put things up. So I've had, interestingly enough, and I have not concentrated or even considered new business at the moment. Like Windsor says, I think people are concentrating on the well-being of their families. It's nice to hear from clients, old clients who say, I never thought I'd spend this much time in the house you built for me. Thank you very much. I'm appreciating it more than I ever have.
I love that.
But we are also working on projects where we are, you know, in the very beginnings of design development. So we're sharing floor plans and furniture plans, and we're sharing, I mean, I was talking to a client, an architect, just yesterday, and said, well, let's take this time to really spend sharing ideas and imagining what our references can be. What do we want the spaces to feel like? What are we going, you know, what do we want the stair rail to be? Instead of sort of always feeling like we're being pushed to the wall to come up with a response in time for a meeting on a certain date. And so we're really sort of taking advantage of that, of the time that's being forced upon us. But in terms of and so those are the kind of meetings we're having. The other kind of meetings I referred to earlier, it's sort of like, okay, what's our shopping list? So I have clients here who are nearby in their house, in a house in Sag Harbor. And, they've got their 2 little kids. And I said, well, we still have some pieces we're still looking for, and I can send you images. And each of them, the husband and wife separately on their own email, said, yes, please, we're so bored. We want to talk, we want to have an adult conversation. So, because I thought in a way it might be kind of pushy and infringing. And they said, no, we really would like to, spend a little time continuing that. But I can send people, fabric, nobody is delivering fabrics to my door here in East Hampton. But should Schumacher want to?
well, we are, I don't know whether UPS then goes to your house, but it's actually very interesting because we do really put a lot of effort to get, samples out and to be 100% operation. Also have a website that actually functions 100%. And I do see a lot of designers, thank God, still being interested in memos and also still placing orders with us.
Yeah, we're still placing all the orders. We're moving forward, and all of the things in progress are continuing forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Randy, let me ask you another question because let's talk real business here for a second. So what I'm learning also from David, you and from Windsor is, this crisis is all about reaching out to your clients, connecting, not, forcing your agenda, but more understanding what's going on. So Randy, have you had a client that didn't want to move forward or said everything on hold? How do you respond to that? Because I'm sure that, out there, a lot of people have experienced that. What's the best way how to go about this?
Well, we haven't had that happen as of yet, but we're 2.5 weeks into this so far. So most of the projects that we had in the works, so to speak, were really curated, really done. We're really doing a lot of fact checking and things like that on them right now, continuing on with the scheming, because like David was saying, the response I've had from some of my other clients have been like, we are bored out of our mind. Please give us something pretty to think about, rather than, homeschooling my kids or watching the news or watching the market or, everything else. So, but, certainly it's a thought in my head of, how do you sensibly say, completely understand it's, all that. So, one of the conversations that we had within my office would be, if we do get somebody who says, hey, it's just really not a good time, we're really going to slow down a little bit. We probably will prepare a little packet of things for them though, so that they have their own little scheme to look at and say, here, just, if you're bored at home or you need to think about it, this is what it would look like and all those kind of things. Because I do think it's kind of an out of sight, out of mind situation at that point. Like I said, we are checking in with our clients pretty regularly, and we are getting some pretty amazing feedback. Like, I got a text message from somebody day before yesterday, or maybe it was Monday, who just said, in all caps, I love my house so much.
Oh.
And,
who's their decorator?
David. No, but so, obviously it's a very valid point. I mean, we have to think that there's going to be a shutdown and that there's going to be a slow and all that. But, I really believe that, if you've got, projects in the pipe and you've got that, they really still need to be nurtured. I mean, the world seems to be shutting down around us in a matter. And I think, you kind of have to be proactive though and keep it going, because I do think it looks terribly professional if you are still reaching out to your clients saying, just want you to know we're still on schedule, or, we're going to have a little bit of delay. Just wanted to, give you a heads up and all that. And we,
I imagine that your viewers are a wide spectrum of designers, where they have maybe 1 or 2 projects, or they might, have 1 or 2 clients, or they might have, 30 clients. I mean, you're going to have a broad group here. I think that it's probably going to stay a little more steady for clients, for those of us who have clients that are on the much higher end, because
absolutely,
they have the stability to where they're not going to cancel their projects. They're invested in them. and they, want to move into them at some point. So, but there's also people who are wondering probably how to stay connected to their clients when their projects are much smaller than that.
Exactly.
And where that decision about moving forward or not is really paramount and tied very much into their ability to sort of like keep the roof over the head. So I think that that's something we certainly have to give a lot of thought to. I would think that it's all, at the end of the day, it all is communicating with your clients, and also trying to see this whole thing from their perspective as well, letting them know that you're seeing it from their perspective. And then sort of figuring out how to work accordingly. But
yeah, because I think, Windsor, something that I've been also thinking a lot about, I think, what I'm really taking away here is, proactive communication with your clients in making it also digestible for them, because they are as uncertain about the future as we are and trying to figure things out. So why, put a huge mountain in front of them if you can slice that mountain down?
Benni, interesting stuff too. I think also, it's something that we have to think about too, is it's not necessarily just of our clients, because right now we're also trying to be very supportive of our manufacturers and very supportive of our showrooms. And so
exactly,
if I know that most of the showroom owners that I know are good friends of mine at this point, after, being in this business 1,000 years. And so they're panicking because they're afraid their business is going away. So if, they can have their people busy thinking about stuff, saying, hey, go drop off a box of samples to Randy, or let's make a little inspiration board and send it to him via an email, kind of things. I want to be very proactive and be receptive to that, because I want to ensure that they also feel like, hey, you've been here for us, but we're also really here for you. We're not giving up either. So, we want to see you succeed. I don't want to see, any showroom hurting as much as I don't want to see anybody hurting right now. And I think
not just the showrooms, also it's those small craftspeople.
Well, the tradespeople.
It's the small workrooms, exactly.
Yeah, our workrooms, and they love what they do. They do it because they're craftsmen, and this is, as much as we feel this, they're really feeling it because they don't have big infrastructures. And I think
I think
and they're scared.
There's such a difference this time. Back to your point, Benni. Honestly, I've had both responses. We have had a quite substantial job we were doing the decorating on and working in conjunction with an architecture firm in New York, where the client just said, let's push the pause button for 2 months. In part, I think they may be anticipating that when things start up again, pricing for construction and that may be more competitive. And I think it's probably why he can afford to do this job and I can't, because he thinks that way. We've also had a meeting this week where clients were presented with a very ambitious project for a new build house and gardens, and they were very enthusiastic. So we've experienced all of it. I think the difference here is being old enough to remember the 2008 crash quite well and living through that, which was pure and simple, not pure and simple, but purely a financially based crisis. And the fallout from that was going to, was understandable on economic terms. Here, I think it's more confusing and unanticipated because this is a crisis that obviously didn't occur because of the economy. It's having very real economic ramifications. How long those ramifications are very hard to predict for everyone. And so, as Windsor says, I'm more concerned about, my little, my independent furniture makers, the small workrooms that, have, need to meet their payrolls, need to pay their rents, need to cover their overheads, but don't have a large, volume of business, and simply how long can they withstand it? Once things get going, I think there's going to be this great big backlog, and hopefully, as somebody described it, it will be a slow reopening of the valve and not the floodgates opening, so things can start in a rational and organized manner and restart in a way that people can meet the need. But I think it's different when the economic crash happened and so many people lost jobs because so many people were leveraged, and you know, you didn't know who was real and who wasn't real in the economy. And I think here it's not. It's very different.
It's broad spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I also think like what I'm taking away from listening to you is, you know, that it's very important to be proactive with your clients, but also probably also, you know, that's at least from, you know, I would suggest everybody do that. Reach out to your workrooms, reach out to your vendors, reach out how they do, but also understand whether they're operational or not, also because then you also know where in your interior design value chain you know, you have holds, or where you can still do work, or what you can still suggest to your clients, because you know that workroom is still open, so you can still upholster a sofa, or you can do, you know. So that's what I'm really taking away from you guys, you know, to say be really proactive.
I think
in
also,
your communication.
I think it's very important for all designers right now to, and this is super helpful for me in life in general, but particularly now, is creating a timeline that's a financial timeline. And it tells you what work, what projects you have. It tells you what your flow of money of design fees coming in. It tells you your flow of what product, if you make, you know, procurement fees over product, it tells you, you can kind of estimate those things. And then you can kind of know without, if nothing changed, where you would be. And that helps you. When you don't know, then fear comes in and all kinds of other things, and it's not productive because you can't really rationally think if you're in that space. So I think creating a timeline that tells you what commitments you have that are concrete, and then you can inform yourself of what you need to do in order to cover your bases where you are now. And if you can't create that, then it kind of tells you that you need to cut back some of your expenses. So you have to be realistic that we don't really know where this is going or what the time frame of it is. So I think in order for self-preservation, but also speaking to your tradespeople, you can also reach out to them and say, listen, this is what's going to move forward. I want you to know what we're going to be sending your way in approximate dollars, so that you can make plans and you can be healthy. And I think that's a really important. Yeah, it's an important exercise to do. And
very good point.
Time now, so it feels like, you know, and it makes you feel good to know that you're looking at it in that way.
Yeah, very good point, Windsor. Thank you.
Well, and I do think you have to have a battle plan right now, being in business, whether you're big or small.
For sure, you can't. You know you can if you've got a lot of CBD.
Is to be prepared, and you have to know what your payroll is and what it's going to take for the next 6 months, and what you're expecting in from your clients, and you know, and all of those other things, and you know, and I do think it's, like I said earlier, I think it's so important to keep all of our little inner family together of people you do business with, whether it's your painter, your decorative painter, your showroom, your furniture maker, you know, or your wallpaper hanger, to keep them, you know, in the line too, of saying, hey, we're thinking about you. Don't worry, you know, we're not closing down. We're just, you know, reevaluating of how we can get you in and when we can get you out.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, before we open for the Q&A session, let me ask you one last question, David. Maybe we start with you about cost and cost adjustments. You know, so I would love to hear very clear ideas of, imagine I was an interior designer, I have a team of 1 or 2, you know, where or what can I do to cut costs, or where do you look, or how, you know, you've been also through the 2009 crisis. So what are things I can start looking at now?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I mean,
me? Well, but I agree. I mean, obviously I've spent, you know, doing cash flow analysis terrifies me, because every time I find out what it costs to keep the lights on in my office, I don't sleep. So, but in this instance, actually, maybe knowledge is power. So we actually have looked at our cash flow, what our receivables are, what our payables are, what we have in terms of deposits on account. That's nothing gives you a clearer picture of the work you have going forward than your deposits on account. So we looked at all of that. Then we look at our monthly expenses, payroll, because obviously, and talking to lots of colleagues in the business, they've said, you know, have you furloughed people? I've made a decision not to do that at the moment, because this analysis tells me that for the moment I don't need to, and obviously I'd like not to. But we have looked at things like, obviously the first thing is rent. You know, I've got 2 floors in my office building. Rent is substantial. And it's not a big building, but actually several of us are in the interior design business in my building. And so we've all been speaking to each other about how we'd like to present a rent reduction proposal to the landlord. We're not in the building, we're not, receiving the services. So
Yes.
That's certainly a thing. I know you're going to talk about the CARES Act next week. And obviously, obviously our messenger costs are down because our trucking costs are down. I mean, New York is, for all intents and purposes, shut down. And so a certain amount of our costs are automatically reduced because we're not doing all the things we're normally doing. But the next, obviously thing would be if we had to furlough some people. I'm hoping, in my naivete, that it won't go that long and that by the end of May, we'll all be back working on a more regular basis. But that's what we've been looking at. And also, I've been looking at who our payables are, and wanting to address, outstanding bills to the smallest vendors first, because they're in the greatest need.
Thank you, David. I'm just looking at the time, and that's Randy, Windsor, do you have like super concrete specific tips how to look at your cost basis, or where, even if it's just the Spotify, subscription that is $8, but like where to cut costs in your office?
Yeah. We actually really, that's one of the first things that we did, was just because for me, I've cultivated such an incredible team that's just sort of not even a possibility to look there. So we found, my father used to joke and say, I could just follow you around and live off your waist. And the truth is that there's so many things that when you run a business and you're in the minutia of a business like ours, there are things, samples of hardware that don't get returned. There's, someone has a particular software on their computer and they no longer are at the, work for us, or they work in a different position where they don't require that, but you've been paying for the license for it for the last 2 years. I mean, there's just in licenses alone, we've purged over $1,000 out of, the bottom line. So I think that looking at that and looking at just efficiencies in general, it just is a time for us to do a massive cleanup. And I think that our business tends to be one because it's very fast, it moves quickly, and our clients, we do a lot to sort of support them. And so I think to be able to look at that and figure out ways where you can more economically deliver something to someone rather than, having a messenger take it in a golden cart, there's different ways of doing things. So I think we're really looking at that, operations in general, and how we can make an improvement there.
Thank you. That helps a lot. Randy, do you have any other cost thing that you've looked at, or do you think you do pretty much the same, or?
Well, pretty much I think everybody's in the same boat. I mean, you're looking at, what can I realistically give up that I don't need, whether it be, like you said, a Spotify account, or, flowers that we have delivered to the office, or something, trivial as those things, or larger things like, courier costs, messenger costs, can we just take the extra time to do this and be a little more thoughtful about, about the economics of it all. But the bottom line is, you have to get pretty lean and mean, when all of this is going on, because, like David and like Windsor, having someone not on my staff is not an option. And it's, I have no intention of even discussing it. Like Windsor said, it takes so long to get a team around you that you trust in the support system and that functions like an incredibly well-oiled machine. So, I'm looking at all the other ways, honestly, I'm about to take a big salary cut just so that I can ensure that my staff doesn't. And, that's okay. I can handle it. I can do things like this. But, I'm not going to go to someone who works for me in accounting and say, I kind of need you to, take a pay cut or be furloughed or something along those lines. So, I think there's a lot of always a little bit of waste we all have in our businesses, like Windsor said, with systems running that we don't need, with licensings and things like that. And, you just go, do we really need to have, 6 corporate cards to American Express that we're paying, $400 a year on? Can we just get one and everybody share it and things like that? So I think it's, I do think it's kind of, you have to get lean and you have to be serious about it. And, David, these landlord rents though, really are scary for some of us bigger, firms. I'm in the D&D building, and it's, the rent comes and it's big and it's there, and it's 28 more days I'm thinking about it again. And so you start to get these thoughts about, hey, we have necessary responsibilities, which we actually did last week on a spreadsheet. These are vital things: payroll, rent, insurance, health insurance, the business insurance. Those are mandatory. Now, what else can we look into? Like, hey,
I think that we have to think vertically. We have to think vertically because we are all in this together. No one is escaping this, okay? No matter what, whether you're Bezos and you have Amazon, or you're, selling ice cream cones on the street. Like, there's no one who this isn't going to impact. So all of us, and you can go to your own silo and look at the people above you and the people below you, and the people that they're in your silo. So how do you all work together? So renters, I'm sure, are thinking about this. They know that this is going to be an issue. They want to keep their families together. So I think all of us, but what's so interesting about this is that it's really a time for all of us to bring and interject a lot more humanity in everything that we do.
Absolutely.
We are so
if there's a lesson to be learned.
Yeah, I don't think any of us were prepared for this, on what level you're on. And I think that, these random acts of kindness that you see people doing,
oh my God,
are so heartwarming. And I think it's so incredible to maybe extend those into our business practices, like making a phone call. Hey, I'm not curious about, like, do you want to move forward with your sofa? How's your mother? Is she doing okay? How are the kids? Are they holding up? And I think all of that's really important right now.
I'm so also blown away just by the medical professionals that had no idea that they, were going to be fighting a war on the front lines like this. And when you see the footage, it's kind of, it brings it home. Our problems by comparison are much smaller. And I think that it's a time that we kind of want to all work together and brainstorm together. So it's a great exercise is to ask the people that have been loyal to us and that have worked with us, have a forum. Ask them, hey, you're valued. Your mind, your creativity is valued. Give me some ideas of insights that you have into how we can be helpful to our community, how we can be better serve our clients, how we can be a better company and be more thoughtful in the way we do things. So engage your people that work for you, your assistants, your project managers, your showroom managers, and really have them a part of this, because I think part of what's difficult about it is people feel isolated and they feel like they're in a silo by themselves. So
Absolutely.
you need to kind of identify that you're there with them.
I think that's a really important advice, and also beautiful message. And I think I see this in our company too. There's more space for humanity, and I see this all around us. And I even see that on Zoom calls. It's very interesting how much more you connect with your friends and your family. My family is in Europe. I obviously can't go there, and I probably also don't want to go there right now. But we all connect, and there's much more time for interpersonal touch points and relationships. So
every email is signed off, stay healthy.
Yeah,
maybe that's how we'll continue to do that.
Be well loved. Yeah.
Right. Sorry, Benny.
No worries. I'm just also looking at the time and trying to be here, the time police. And I do want to honor, the questions that we have received so far. So let's do it the following way. I ask a question, and then whoever answers first has 20 seconds to answer it. and so that we get through it, so let's be super short and super precise because we already have 5 questions and I'm sure that we're going to get more. So somebody asked, should I charge less for virtual consultations during the lockdown?
1 second.
I think the question is, do I keep my normal billing if somebody, if I can't see a person in my client in person and I do it virtually, do I charge less?
Your time is your time. Yeah, your time is your time. So
Okay.
I think there's other ways that you can be. I think there's other ways you can do that, but I don't think that your time should be cut short of that.
Charge the same, but give more.
Exactly.
I think that's great. Next question. I'm a new designer and I know how to draw rooms to scale, but I do not know how to draw them using a computer program yet. What do you recommend for a basic program that I could use, train myself on during this time?
CAD.
Hands down.
Right? Yeah, hands down. Okay.
I've never learned a computer program.
Yeah, by the way, I don't do it either. But
I'm still drawing on tracing paper.
Albert would have scolded you.
Albert loved tracing paper.
I know. I have some of his tracing paper drawings.
And I mean, you can take your iPhone and take a picture and send it to your clients.
Yeah,
right?
somebody taught me how to scan something with in the Notes app. So
okay, I hope you're going to train me that after this call.
Okay.
Lindsay Harrod asks, how do you suggest handling clients who still want to meet on site and go shopping in areas where shops aren't shut down and you don't feel comfortable doing so?
That's a hard no. Sorry, I'm jumping in there. I keep thinking it's a game show. Okay.
Yeah, I'm with Windsor. I think that helping myself, my family, and the people that I work with and I'm around is much more important than talking about, let's go look at a sofa or we need to pick out a slab of marble.
Yeah.
And maybe you can also give it.
That's a sign.
Maybe you can also give it a spin and you say, look, I want to be socially responsible and rather, push this out because I might be symptom free and I don't want to infect anybody. I think you can give it a positive spin. And
then maybe give them a link to the medical workers that are right on the front line that are begging us to stop gathering in groups and being out.
Yeah. All right, next question. What is your take on continuing advertising during this time? I'm a one-person design firm and I don't want to fall behind on keeping my name out there, but want to be wise about how I spent my dollars. I've heard the last thing I should do cut in times like this is advertising.
Well, I would say you more than ever now, you actually don't have to spend money on advertising because everybody's connected on the internet. There's Instagram, there's, log things on Pinterest. I mean, there's so many venues in which, and there are so many online magazines that are looking for content. I'd contact them. I mean, I think there's so many ways to get your name out there that are probably easier now and have more eyes on it now than there ever have.
Yeah, social media right now is terrible.
I agree. I think it's not the time for advertising.
I don't think. I think there's a time for self-promotion, but I don't think it has to. I don't think it requires an expenditure of money.
Yeah, paid for advertising.
Do Pinterest, do Instagram, do House, whatever it is.
Live stories on Instagram. Put sketches up. I mean, there are all sorts of local, online shelter magazines, Cottages and Gardens, Lux. They all have, online components. There, you could contact them directly, because certainly nothing is being photographed right now. Photographers aren't going to projects and photographing things. I mean, everybody had, magazines have a library and a stockpile, but I think, their new content is always interesting to these people.
Yeah. So then somebody asked, do you think focusing on e-design is wise to keep the business going if you don't do it now?
Is e-design, that's interesting. That's an interesting question. Well, I started an e-design business many years ago and called Room in a Box. And I have thought about dusting it back off, to be honest. I felt like we were in the industry a little early and people had not quite gotten to where they were comfortable entirely buying high-level design online. There's been a lot of things that were for more big box style design. And I think it's an interesting time. Yes, I would say yes.
Okay, cool. So then, Windsor, you mentioned, and I'm just reading the question, looking at our businesses differently and thinking and makeover of sorts. If this continues, do you see value in some of the smaller decorator businesses partnering up with others to redefine themselves or repackage themselves in a unique and necessary way for our time? Really curious about thinking outside the box with my business.
I'm not sure I got the question in that, but
shall we partner up with other small businesses and partner up and try to redefine ourselves, or how am I as a small business, how am I going to go about this?
I think it's a time for introspection. I don't think it's a time to team up unless you have a real business plan.
Absolutely.
I think that sounds like panic to me. Sort of feeling.
Partnerships are very, very delicate, and how they work. You really have to know someone quite well for quite a long time to understand that you both think along the same lines. Otherwise, it's really going to end in disaster. I think I'd be careful with that one.
Well, unless it's something like collaboratives. I mean, there are all sorts of interesting, in industrial, Industry City now has all those spaces where it's not quite people forming partnerships, but there's a certain banding together of small businesses that sort of take advantage of, what would have been, off the street shoppers. So they're going to see one vendor who's a bookbinder, and they're walking down the corridor and they see somebody else who's a gilder, and they see somebody else who's making, weaving something. I think, so maybe I'm not sure that collaborating in with people who are in related fields, but I don't know that, a young designer with a small firm should, join forces with somebody else. But an architect and and an independent landscape architect and a potter and
Exactly.
and a decorative painter, and I think people like that could form an interesting collaborative if they had, even if they didn't necessarily have the same point of view, but shared an aesthetic value. I think back to Windsor's point of thinking about the business in a new way, where we all set up, when I came out in this business, sorry, very odd choice of words, but when I started, in the old, when I came out in this business, it was a surprise to no one. But everyone hung out their shingle and forge their own way. And I'm not sure that that's the only way to do it. And just like I've seen in the not-for-profit, where there's a lot of redundancy, there might be some benefit to finding people that you felt were creatively and aesthetically motivating.
You know how sometimes when you're naughty and you get a second chance, and you say to yourself, you make all these promises like, okay, I'm going to do this better, I'm going to be nicer in this way, or whatever. I think if we really take this in, I think this is a time for us to look at ourselves, look at our businesses, and say that we can be so much more inclusive. We can be our businesses can be set up in so much more responsibly. And I think that, when we build this again, I don't think there's any accident that this happened where it's so big that none of us, that we're completely surrendered to it. We're supposed to look inside, and we're supposed to say, okay, if we're going to build this business again, how are we going to build it where we're building it in a way that it helps more people?
Well, I think everyone has to go along. Yeah,
you made me think of it, David, when you said, something about, you said something that sounded like said it was philosophical or thoughtful or something. And I think we could rebuild our businesses where if we wanted to do a partner with, an organization that needs money. And so if you set up your business in a way where a percentage of it goes to, people on the autistic spectrum, and it's a small percentage, but you're doing something, that's the kind of things we should be thinking about right now, is how can we structure our businesses where they actually engage, disadvantaged people? Let's start there.
Yeah. I think this is, I think, Windsor, maybe we take these words that I think are very beautiful, as the ending note of this call. I think, I think that there's a lot of opportunities. I really saw and heard this from all of you guys, and think you can look at it as a challenge. And yes, there is a lot of rocks in the middle of our paths right now that we need to overcome. But if you zoom yourself out, there's also a lot of opportunities to rethink your business, to be more human, to be more inclusive, but also to get leaner and to reassess your costs. And another thing that I really learned today also is to be proactive. To be proactive in your way of communication, rather than going being in your office or being at home and like doing nothing. Rather talk to your vendors, talk to your clients, talk to your work groups, talk to everybody around you, so that you understand what's going on and that you can plan accordingly. Windsor, David, Randy, I cannot thank you enough for being here today and carving out time. And I cannot thank everybody who's been watching us enough for listening to what we had to say. And I hope it was helpful for all of you. I hope you could take like bits out of this. And again, we try to do this every week, so watch out for the link, because we really want to provide help to the community. We're going to get through this, and we're going to get through this together. I'm really convinced about that.
And can I just say, next week, please listen in, because it is a very important topic. And
Absolutely.
there is a safety net out there that you might be eligible for. So definitely be here for the next one.
Thank
be
you.
safe.
I will be.
Be safe. Stay safe, as David says. Stay safe, guys. Everybody out there. And thank you for joining.
Be healthy.
Bye, Benny.
Be
Bye,
well.
David.
Bye.
Sir.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Bye, Windsor.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.